Welcome to Cold War Conversations, the home of real stories of the Cold War. Now, I'm trying to win an award. Please go to coldwarconversations.com and vote for us as Best History Podcast. Thank you.
After the call to stand still, we were then supposed to shoot once into the air, and if the refugee had continued running, we were supposed to aim at either the feet or arms.
This is Cold War Conversations. If you're new here, you've come to the right place to listen to first-hand Cold War history accounts. Do make sure you follow us in your podcast app so that you don't miss out on future episodes. Today is the 35th anniversary of the opening of the Berlin Wall and East German border in the autumn of 1989. In this riveting episode, I speak with Dietmar Schultke, a member of the Grenztruppen, the East German border guards. Dietmar opens up about his life in the GDR, sharing personal stories of his recruitment into the border troops, the rigorous training he endured and the psychological pressures he faced during his service. Soldiers were constantly under surveillance, with 1 in 10 being a Stasi informant. The cultural impact of the time was not lost on Dietmar. He vividly recalls attending the Bruce Springsteen concert in East Berlin. The concert was a beacon of hope, yet the return to the border was a stark reminder of the barriers that still existed. I'm delighted to welcome Dietmar Schultke to our Cold War conversation. Just a short message before we start this interview. English is not Dietmar's first language, but I thought it valuable to hear the interview in his own voice.
I'm growing up in a little village 100 kilometers south from Berlin. The area called Spreewald.
Oh yeah, where the pickles are from.
Yes, of course, that's it, yes.
How were you recruited into the border troops?
When I was 19, I received a card in the post. It was from the military district command. It had a date on it. If I didn't go, I could be arrested up by the German People's Police. So I went there.
Did you try and refuse service on the border?
Oh, this is a longer story. I had been pen pals with a German-American woman from New York since I was 10 years old. She is a relative of my aunt, around 40 years older than me, and came to visit our village. I liked American Wild West and action films, and we could watch West German television. Anyway, we became pen pals, and when I was 14, she invited me on a trip to New York. As you know, that didn't work out. When I was 19, I met her in communist Budapest and we talked about a possible escape to the West. In the end, it was too dangerous for her, but I stood with her in front of the American embassy in Hungary and would have loved to march in with her. I could have applied for political asylum. She didn't want to do too. She was afraid of the headlines in the media. So I traveled back to the GDR. 3 months later, I was called up to the army. Every young man had to wear a uniform for 18 months. Compulsory military service. At the appointment, an officer asked me, "Can you imagine serving on the GDR state border?" I replied hesitantly, "Yes, I thought maybe I would get a chance to escape there." 2 weeks later, before I was called up, I fled to Prague and considered escaping via Austria. I met a journalist from Austria in a pub and asked him about escape routes. He advised me against it. It was too dangerous. So I traveled back to the GDR.
So when you are called up for the border guards, how are you prepared for service at the border?
I received my training in Eisenach. It's a Lutheran city in Thuringia. It lasted 4 months. We learned how to march, sharpshooting, the function of the border fences, and they had built a model of the Iron Curtain in Eisenach. We were also taught politics. It was the time of Gorbachev. There was also combat training. We had to do a lot of shooting exercises, including throwing hand grenades. We were trained for a possible Third World War. For example, we had to sit on a wrecked lorry covered in napalm and wait with a gas mask until the fire stopped. We also practiced arresting fugitives. It was so physical training, including a 20-kilometer timed march, several kilometers under the gas mask in bad weather. We were also often harassed by non-commissioned officers. They wanted to break our useful disobedience, the army as a disciplinary center.
So it sounds like the training was quite tough. Were the officers bullying you?
Yes. So I can remember my colleague in my room, a young boy from the East Sea in East Germany. The place he is growing up called Ueckermünde, and he was also 19 years old, and we speak later than 22 o'clock. Then officially we must sleep, 22 o'clock, everybody must sleep, but we talk about our girlfriends and music and so on. And then the door is open and an officer come in and call it, "You has broken the rule. Young soldier, go out," and then they must clean all toilets all the night long. In this building are more than 100 soldiers, and they must do a hard job. And early in the morning he comes back, and he was so depressed from his job at the toilet. So that is the experience of my own. So,
can you tell me some of the specific training that you were given as a border guard?
Yes, there was a training for war and special training for deployment at the border. In Eisenach, there was a replica of the Iron Curtain. It consisted of 2 fences with a death stripe in between. We practiced arresting refugees. The GDR officers called them border violators, as well as checking passports. We also learned the uniforms and technology on the West German side, Federal Border Guard, the British Army, and the US Army. There were also politics lessons. The officers divided us soldiers into 7 different trust categories. The more you were convinced of the GDR system, the closer you were allowed to get to the West German border. But it was top secret. We young soldiers never heard about it. Later, I go into the archive and I found this system of 7 parts to go at the border. I was given the second worst level. I was only allowed to go right up to the first fence. I also always had a guard at my side who looked after me. Distrust was important towards us conscripts. You never knew if the other person would risk trying to escape.
So if you were a border guard, you were never on your own. You were always with somebody else to try and make sure that you would not escape.
Yes, that was the system. Yes, never I go alone. If you're an officer, then you can go alone at the at the fence, yes. So, but I only 18 months at the border, and I never can go alone. That was the system, yes.
Yeah, and you were not a member of the SEDs?
No. In East Germany, the inhabitants, 8% or 9% was in the SED party, and that is all. It's the same with the young boys. They must go to the army. It's the same person. It's only 8 or 9%. It's really not communism thinking inside the young boys and soldiers. we are not communism soldiers. No, most of us thinking with West German, West European style. We love rock music. We love the American way of life. We dream from travel around the world, but we must make this job at the border fence. And for me, it was really frustration. Yes.
Now, you mentioned earlier there was training for war. What
Yes.
was your role in the event of war? This was presumably if NATO had crossed the border into East Germany.
So the head of the border troops, Klaus-Dieter Baumgarten, designed a scenario at the Moscow Military Academy in 1963. In it, he praised Hitler's Blitzkrieg. For me, it was, I can't believe it. I read this. Yes, he praised Hitler's Blitzkrieg, a communism leader. Yes, incredible. The border troops played a special role on the front line. During training, we often had to do gas mask training, and the comments, nuclear flash from the left or nuclear flash from the right, practice and lie in the opposite direction, hands in front of our eyes. It was ridiculous. Baumgarten knew that it was difficult to assess the soldiers' reactions to a nuclear war. He also assumed that large parts of the Harz and the Thuringian forest would catch fire. The aim of the struggle was a socialist Germany as a whole. That is also for me incredible to read it in a paper. So they dream from a big communism Germany. Wow. After the end of the GDR, Baumgarten received a prison sentence of 6.5 years for shooting refugees. The apocalyptic psyche of fanatical rulers always frightens me. Why do such personalities keep coming to power?
Dietmar, where were you stationed in East Germany? Which part of the border were you on?
Yes, after 4 months of basic training, I also received approximately 6 weeks of training to become a dog handler. Because the mines were dismantled in the early 1980s, the border troops increasingly used dogs, both in dog runs at the border fence and to accompany soldiers. Around 1988, there were 3,000 dogs in the border troops. My location was the Harz, and I received my dog training in Ilsenburg. I was assigned a German shepherd named Nena from Brocken. So the first I hear the name of my dog Nena, I think 99 red balloons. Do, 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 do. You know the song?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
so that was funny. The dog was my blessing in disguise. It gave me a social purpose. Nena was a family dog owned by private people. I could read that in the vaccination certificate. She was totally playful. Still, she had to learn how to bite refugees' upper arm, but she usually only got as far as the refugee's bottom. A soldier had to play the refugee. And in the evening, while showering, you could see which soldier played the refugee for Nena, because there was a prize on his bottom. After training, I joined the 13th Border Company. This was initially stationed in the village of Rote Sütte. Later, there was a new building in the village of Elend. My area of operation was the hiking trails on the Brocken mountain. I was deployed there for 12 months.
And you sent me a lovely photo of you and Nina.
Yes.
So Nina from Brockenblick is Nina from the Brocken, really? Is that sort of an English translation?
Yeah, Nina of Brocken Few. So Brocken Few. So it's the name is in her passport. She has a passport, yes, and there I can read it inside. Yes, it is a full name. Nina of Brocken Few. Long name.
Wow.
And a beautiful name, yeah.
Yeah. So can you just give me a bit more details as to what your mission was at the Brocken and also describe what the Brocken was as well?
Yes. For civilian people, the Brocken was a forbidden mountain. You must know this because that is the biggest mountain in the Harz Mountains. It's a historical mountain. Heinrich Heine wrote a lot of poems about this mountain. Johann Wolfgang Goethe visits this mountain. He wrote also poems about it. So it is a really historical mountain. Goethe wrote about in Faust, his big drama. And everybody knows about the Brocken. But if you buy a map, you go into a tourist shop in Harz, in a city in maybe Bennikenstein. It's a small city. I do this if I was at the border as a soldier. I buy a map from the Harz mountain and open the map, and you never will find the Brocken because it was a forbidden mountain. So it was incredible. And so the civilian people never knows about the Brocken because you can use the map for escaping to go to West Germany. That was the reason, At the Brocken, we checked the holiday makers for passes. Citizens could hike or ski up to halfway up the mountain with appropriate documents. The summit of the Brocken was coordinated with a wall behind which the Red Army and the Stasi had listening systems. The Stasi bought his systems in West Germany. That is also incredible. We also checked the track stripe at the first border fence. Of course, in the worst case scenario, we would also have had to arrest refugees. Luckily, I never found myself in this situation. In 1988, 2,300 GDR citizens tried to flee to the west. Around 75% were arrested on arrival by the People's Police and the Transport Police or the Stasi. Only 25% were arrested by the border troops. There were only 2 escape attempts in my area of operation. I was never directly involved.
Now, you mentioned your comrades during your training. Now, when you're actually on the border, what did you talk about with your comrades?
A shift lasted an average of 8 hours. There were always 2 of us at the border, but we never knew who I was going on patrol with us that day. The list of pairs of positions was only announced immediately before the start. In this way, a group escape should be prevented. 1 in 10 border guards was a Stasi spy. So there was certainly mistrust. I talked to my guard leader about everyday life in the border company, about my girlfriend, or about parties and music groups, about vacation trips, or about my professional future. Of course, celebrities and actors were also an issue. What I never talked about was my American pen pal in New York. This depressed me because my most fervent wish was to overcome this limit. There was also psychological pressure and so much boredom.
That must have been a real challenge. I mean, when you talk about music, were you allowed to talk about Nina and her red balloons, or would it have to be just...
So that was possible. So in 1988, you remember Gorbachev and Perestroika, Glasnost, that was no problem. Yes, Nena, I can talk about the music from Nena, yes. That was no problem.
That's interesting. I would have thought that might have been frowned on to some degree, but I guess not. Now, also with your comrades, did they tell you stories about their experiences of being on the border?
Yes, the senior comrades told me stories of attempted escapes. When I arrived, I was particularly afraid of Red Army soldiers running amok. During my basic training in Eisenach, I had to go to the border for the first time because there was a border alarm near Gerstungen. I was with another soldier right at the first fence and was afraid of an armed Russian. We had 450,000 Red Army soldiers stationed in the GDR, and unfortunately, it was the case that if a soldier deserted, he was threatened with summary liquidation if he were arrested. So he had nothing left to lose. Otherwise, I knew when I arrived in the company that the Brocken deployment site was a harsh location in terms of weather, long winter, violent storms, and over 100 Red Army soldiers on the Brocken summit.
Did you hear many stories about Russian soldiers sort of running amok or killing people or anything like that?
Yes, that was the most experienced story. So soldiers, and also my brother, he is 10 years older than me. He also must go at the border fence 10 years before myself stay at the fence. And these stories from Russian amok soldiers, so that is really a fact, yes. So that was... It is happened. It has really happened, and that is not a story. That is a fact. That has happened. Yes, the hard job at the Russian army, Red Army, and the 100 Russian soldiers stay in barracks on top of the Brocken mountain, and they feel like prisoners. And one Russian told in an interview after the wall is fallen, "So I stay in Siberia a long time, and I know the winter here on top of the Brocken, that is the same like Siberia, maybe much more harder." So it's a really hard job for the Red Army soldiers in East Germany, yes.
What were the rest of your comrades like as people?
Oh, they like to write letters to their friends and were happy to receive packages with cakes and good sausage. Since our food was modest, they liked to go out for 5 hours about once every 7 days and get drunk. In addition, the older conscripts were happy to delegate tasks to the younger ones. In other words, we had to clean the rooms and take out the garbage. There was also harassment from seniors or arrogant soldiers. For example, power games. They were humiliated by being made to understand that they would be at the border for a long time, while they would be back in civilian life in just a few weeks.
What were the backgrounds and beliefs of your comrades?
Most conscripts simply wanted to kill their time. 18 months of her youth were strenuous. Many had a girlfriend, but the love often fell apart. We rarely got vacation, only 18 days in 18 months. Many did their job because it was duty. There were few like me who really felt like outsiders. 100 young men involuntarily in a company, there's also a lot of aggression. I don't want to experience a day of it again.
So were you in fear of violence a lot of the time from other soldiers?
So violence is aggression. So young people stay and they sit and eat together after, if you stayed 8 or 10 hours at the border, and so there's a lot of boredom, and they miss their girlfriend, and it's over the girlfriend, right? And they frustrations, aggressions, and then it gives trouble sometimes. So stress, yes. So it's not in harmony to stay there. If you're a harmony person with love for good all together, so it's not the place to stay in harmony there.
Yeah, no, understood. Can you describe what an average day on the border is like? What is the routine that you were having to go through?
In the early shift, we were woken up at 5 a.m. We went to breakfast, made ourselves some bread for the snack at the border, and took coffee with us in a thermos. At around 6 a.m., the platoon commander announced the composition of the sentry pairs. Afterwards, the patrols departed. We placed around 18 or 20 soldiers in the back of the off-road vehicle. Then we drove to the Brocken, which was a good 12 kilometers away. The truck drove up Brockenstraße and distributed the sentry pairs to various stations in the area. As a rule, they had to wait in the forest for 8 hours and report to the officers every 2 hours. As a rule, everything without incident. But they also give this message over walkie-talkie in a special language. So in West Germany, they listen us, and we used a special language, so it's everything top security, our message, yes, so to the officer. Everything.
So you were using sort of like code words?
Yes, that's it. Perfect, yes.
Okay.
Since I had a dog, I was usually allowed to go on patrol with a patrol leader, which made the time pass more quickly. After 8 hours of duty, I returned to the company, cleaned the weapons, had dinner, and then there was a little free time to watch TV or write letters to my girlfriend. But we only can watch East German television, you know.
Right.
And also radio stations, only East German radio stations allowed.
How did you stay warm or stay dry up on the Brocken in the weather?
Yeah, the Brocken mountain is the most windy mountain of all in Germany. We have more wind than in the Alps. So we are the most windy place in Germany, in United Germany. So the Brocken is it's the highest mountain in North Germany. And it's the weather, windy. And sometimes if we have 3 days orkan, you know what it means, orkan? It feels like dark wind, strong wind.
Orkan is the German for hurricane.
Yeah, so sometimes it was really crazy, the weather, and we have more than 2 meter snow, and it is really dangerous to drive with a car to the Brocken mountain, but we must do this because there is the border, and the office give us the comment, you must drive this car and top on the Brocken, and it was really crazy and dangerous. I know about an accident in Thuringian forest. There was in snow at the mountain, the car lost the balance and it gives an accident and then 8 young soldiers death. So we must do it. The officers told us that is here your job at the border, and go to this border, and I give you now the commander, I am the boss, and you must do this now and drive this car. And then an accident happened, yes, but not in my company. But I know about it. I go into the archive and found these cases. That's really facts. It's crazy. Yes.
It's really interesting you saying that, since that time you've looked in the archives and learned a lot more about what actually happened
Yes.
up there. You talk a lot about boredom of the job. How did you deal with that boredom?
Well, the boredom is really psychologically fact into this army. The boredom annoyed me terribly, but not only me. A lot of soldiers are sick from boredom. I suffered from my existence, especially after attending the Bruce Springsteen concert in East Berlin. I became unstable, and other soldiers took advantage of this by making fun of my whining. There was a saying among the soldiers, the days are pressing against him. So time as a burden is philosophy, a question of existence. Sometimes you feel like a Buddha stuck on a tree 8 hours or 10 hours. So the young boys never done this before, and they feel sick, really sick. We sat in the forest, yes, and it was incredible. I was finally counting the days and hours in the army, and returning to civilian life was like a liberation. That's it, yes.
Did some soldiers just crack up and couldn't continue?
Yeah, so it's if they stay in trouble with a long time and boredom, so and we are go to at a couple to the border fence, and sometimes your partner is a not so good friend to you, and you stay in stress with him. Sometimes it feels really dangerous. You know not what will really happen in the next hour with him, and aggressions, I told you. So the feeling is sometimes frustration, but the most time was only, I look to the watch, only 10 minutes go. I wish 8 hours are over and finish this job today and go back to the company and eat something. But a lot of people stay in stress with time, a lot of soldiers, yeah. So this is really, you can write a book about this feeling, boredom at the fact.
What were your instructions if you found somebody escaping?
As a rule, I was always subordinate to my post leader. He was in command of me. During my training, I had learned that when a refugee was arrested, if he didn't stop, I should set my dog on him. Now, I had a faithful family dog who would probably have played with a refugee, but I find it difficult to imagine biting. The dog was a good excuse for me. Once the fugitive was caught, he had to be searched for weapons. The guard leader would have stood there with his weapon, and I would have searched the refugee for knives or other weapons. That was the job. we learned it in, yes.
With the East German border, either in Berlin or the border with West Germany, you hear about a shoot to kill order. Were you specifically told to shoot to kill?
Now, we weren't taught that. After the call to stand still, We were then supposed to shoot once into the air, and if the refugee had continued running, we were supposed to aim at either the feet or arms.
Right.
You can read it also. You can read it also in the text. There's a special border law for soldiers, and in my book I reprinted the original text. So you must shoot in the air. If you're not stopped, the refugee goes to west much more. Then you must shoot to the arm or feet. That was during my time, yes. So in the 80s.
I did interview somebody who knew somebody else who'd served on the border, and they'd said just the cocking of pulling the bolt back on an AK-47 was normally enough to stop somebody running, because they would hear that and think, right, the next shot is probably going to be for me. Did you have any instructions if somebody was crossing the border from the west?
So I cannot really remember the situation. We had never practiced a case like this. I can't really remember it. We were always just worried about refugees from our own country heading west. So that is the situation for me. Was a situation, yes.
You mentioned right at the start of the interview that one of the reasons you agreed to serve on the border was because you thought you might have had an opportunity to escape. Did you get anywhere in terms of planning or seeing any opportunities?
Yes, I thought about running away, especially before I was called up to the border. I was in Prague for a week and pondered escape routes through Austria. At the border, I was given the second worst category. I was only stationed in the rear of the country, which included the Brocken. Like any other refugee, I would have had to overcome both fences with watchtowers, alarm system, and dog runs in between. It was resignate. Above all, my guard leader looked after me with 60 cartridges. My thoughts of escape were frozen on that iron curtain.
So your partner had 60 bullets, and I'm presuming you had 60 bullets as well.
Yes.
Right.
So that is the system. So I look to you and you must look to me. If I want to go to West Germany, he must stop me. That is his job. So my partner must stop me if I do this. That is the system, at this iron curtain. One day, we were patrolling halfway up the Brocken. We saw a hole in the first border fence. It was a construction site. The sergeant asked, "Shall we leave?" He said it for fun. I knew he wanted to study in GDR. He was very good-natured. I could have tried it, but then he would have been really stressed, possibly in military prison. I think it would have been difficult because there were soldiers standing guard where there was an open spot. So only at risk of life. But I won't risk my life for the chance of freedom. If I had wanted to escape myself, I would have had to disarm him and put him out of action. But how? I didn't want to cause him any stress, no violence on my part.
And that particular sergeant sounds like he was quite a nice person. You say he was very good-natured.
Yes. So he was a young, good guy, good soldier. We speak very often about our dreams, but never about my girlfriend in New York City. That was forbidden for me. But our leisure, so traveling, we like Hungary, and so we have a good feeling together in these 8 hours. We stay at the fence, and so we feel like comrades, very good comrades. Yes, and then he told this, let us go over the fence. But it was a joke. I know it. So
yeah. So he had a sense of humour there as well. I imagine time passed quicker when you were with him than with other people.
yeah, so that is good. If you have a comrade, you can speak and have fun together, play with the dog together. So 8 hours, it's very well, very, very fast. So it's good feelings then. So it's like you're walking in nature and just relax. You feel like in holidays with a good comrade. Yeah.
Did you stay in touch with any of your comrades?
I stay in touch with some comrades, but not from my company. I have connections because I wrote 2 books about the Iron Curtain, and then I stay in contact if I give lessons, or they found my website, so they write me letters, and then I have some connections, yes.
Do any of them speak English?
Oh, I'm not sure. I can ask if somebody of them speaks English, but from one I know he never speaks English now. But the other soldier, I can ask him, yes.
Thank you. Sorry to drop that with you there. Did any of your comrades describe situations where they'd seen or prevented an escape?
Oh, yes. A border guard told me this story from winter 1987-88. It was one winter evening. The military vehicle with around 18 soldiers drove down the Brocken streets. The first lieutenant sat next to the driver. Suddenly, a civilian vehicle came towards them. This was unusual because we were in a restricted area. The first lieutenant got out and waved the red stop light. He wanted to check the permits. 2 or 3 young people from Saxony were sitting in the car. They wanted to head west. The military vehicle parked on a curve. The young people swerved and drove into a tank barrier. As far as I know, the young people were uninjured and had to lie face down in the snow. They were searched, arrested, and then taken to prison. So if you do this, you must go into the prison 2 or 3 years. That was the normally case in East German law. They received a trial according to section 213 of the GDR border law, unauthorized border crossing. This usually resulted in several years in prison. Yes, that's it.
I have interviewed some people who have been arrested on the border. One specifically in Czechoslovakia, where the border guards did fire over their heads to stop them running.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you ever have to threaten to use your weapon during your service?
No, I never had to threaten anyone with a gun.
And what would you have done if you'd seen an escape attempt?
My post leader determined what needed to be done. Anyway, I was glad I had the dog. I would have sent Nena ahead, but she just wanted to play. In addition, any border guard could miss. There were even complaints from officers because soldiers missed shots so often. But everyone knew about the deadly logic of this surveillance. So everybody knows. Not everybody. I think the 3 young people from Saxony, they were teenagers, I think, and then they have not too much information about the border. But I can remember if I was 12 years old, we go to Berlin, and I stayed. If I go into the area of the Berlin Wall, I know my own soldiers from the East German army will shut me down. So I know it was 12 years. So, and I asked myself with 12 years, what a crazy state, what a government I have. I can't believe it. So for me, it's a nightmare with 12 years. Yeah. So, but not everybody knows about the dangerous East German border. Sometimes they are naive and what will be happen? We go and to the fence, let us start, and then they stay in a tragedy. And the worst cases, you must die for freedom. Crazy.
Yeah. It was described by the East German government as the anti-fascist protection barrier.
Yes. So that it's also I learned this word in the lessons in school. I was 14 years old, and I must write it in a test in political faculty at school, and I wrote lies for my teacher because I want to become a good note. So that was really crazy. Yes. Mm.
Can you just talk a little bit more about the psychological pressure of being a border guard?
Anyone who was convinced of the communist system and who wanted to believe that a GDR refugee was a criminal and should be arrested had now physiological pressure. That happened, but there were even carrier officers, all of whom were usually members of the SED party, who had strong doubts about their existence. There were many of us conscripts who simply wanted to get their service over with and were counting the days until they were released. However, those who had wanderlust, like me, suffered from control. Every 10th border guard in the company was a Stasi spy. I couldn't tell any comrades about my correspondent in New York. I really suffered from this isolation in the collective, and above all, I guarded my own captivity.
Did you ever look at your Stasi file, Dietmar? Because they must have been aware that you were writing to somebody in the US.
The question is, in the 80s, we never had a computer system like today we have internet. So Stasi, Volkspolizei, Transportpolizei, they're not connected. And I know that the Stasi has a special part to control letters to capitalism foreigners, foreign countries. Yes, that was at the Stasi a special office. Yes, the Stasi has a special office where only they control letters from capitalism foreign countries. And I wrote more than 12 years to my pen pal to New York letters very often, every year. But if after the wall is falling, I ask at the Stasi archive, do you found any messages about my connection to America? And the leader of this part of the Stasi archive told me in this part they have all destroyed all informations in early 1990. So before they can catch connected all information, they destroyed this part. So more than 98% of the connection about the contact with foreign countries and capitalism, they can destroy all information.
Dietmar's talking about the shredding of certain sections of the Stasi archives in late 89, 1990. More recently, new ways have been discovered to try and piece together the shredded files.
In these times, to found new computer systems to take the puzzles together from all these stripes of papers, it's a really busy job. And also today they looked in the archive to connect all the pieces together and become an answer. Yes, so that is really difficult. So actually, I have now Stasi Akte. That's actually the fact. But they told me, wait 2 years, and then you can ask another. Maybe we have modern computer systems, and we can found the puzzles together, take it together, and found also maybe about you some information. So my girlfriend wrote me from Mexico, from Hawaii, from New York. So when she goes on holiday, he sent me nice postcards, and I can't believe there is no information at the Stasi. So I wait.
Yeah. Yeah, because I wonder, you were saying about being at the second lowest level of trust, whether any of that was based on the fact that they knew you had some contact with somebody in the West.
I asked myself why I came at the border, because I stay in really good contact with America, with letters. And I asked myself, and after I wrote for my book, I gone to the military archive, and the most interested reason, that was not the Stasi information for the young soldiers. Maybe you are a good soldier for the border. The first question was, the Volkspolice, also Deutsche Volkspolizei, look it over every young boy. Is it a good boy for the fence, for the border? And they have a bureaucracy formula. And the first question was, do you have aunt or uncle in West Germany or West Berlin? That was the main interesting question. Not if you are in the SED party or whatever. No, if there was an intensive contact to West Berlin, West Germany with uncle or cousin or whatever, then they have write the information, the Volkspolice, not the Stasi. And so also my boss in the factory, I worked as a machinist in a factory, and they also write Mr. Dietmar Schultke is a normal worker in the factory. That's okay. No bad ends, no bad anything is fine. So then after this information, I became at 2 times visit me a member of the Volkspolizei in private in my home. They asked me, do you want to go to the police? We need more young boys, soldiers for the Volkspolizei, not for the border troops. Only he asked me a longer term to go to the Volkspolizei. And I found it, why he comes to me and asks me this. I found it very special and feel not good in touch with him. But after half an hour, he goes home, and later I can understand his visits because he want to ask me, what do you think about the government, our GDR system? And so that was his really thinking about me, and I never speak about the government in front of a police member, bad things about the government. I'm not crazy. I want no contact with Volkspolizei, So, but that was happened before I must go to the army, so I can remember it, yes.
So they did check you out?
Yes,
then
yes.
Too.
They were.
Dietmar, we talked about the boredom. We talked about the psychological pressure of being on the border. Did some of the soldiers take their lives because of what the work was like, what they were doing, or was anybody demoted?
Oh, yes. There are some people demoted, yes. For my book, Nobody Gets Through, I researched suicides in the military archives. From December 1983 to November 1988, the border troops recorded 122 suicide attempts. The border troops had a strength of almost 50,000 soldiers. 1 in 4 suicide attempts was linked to the strict border regime. For example, there was a young officer trainee whose parents had applied to leave the country for West Germany, and he believed in the GDR. But the officer then demoted the young man. That annoyed him. But what annoyed him most of all was that his parents took his sister with them to the West. He liked her very, very much. During one shift while he was on guard duty at the compound, he put a bullet in his head and was dead. So that is really a fact. I looked into the archives and found these cases. You can read it also in my books. And otherwise, so they have doubts about the system, what I am doing here, so boredom, and I found no sense in my life.
Now, you did mention earlier about attending the Bruce Springsteen concert in East Berlin. Can you describe what that was like and then how that felt when you returned back to the Grenztruppen?
Yes, I can really remember like a headline. It was only a small information, but for me it was a headline. I can't believe it. So it was the same like Bruce Springsteen is a ghost for me, a hero. And then I read it in the newspaper at the border trip, Bruce Springsteen giving a concert in East Berlin. I can't believe it. Springsteen, incredible. I was a fan since I am 16 years old. So the news resembled a moon landing. Yes, that's for me feeling like it, a sensation. If I didn't go to America, then my idol will come to East Berlin. My friends got tickets and I was lucky. I was allowed to take my vacation at that time. Really, more than 160,000 young people wanted to experience Springsteen. You know, the Wembley Stadium, I don't know, maybe 80,000 people inside. We have in East Germany, our small country, more than 160,000 people. During the concert, looking at all the homemade American flags, I felt like I was in America. It felt like in Woodstock. The concert was really my Woodstock. I felt like I was intoxicated. He said in German, really in German, I came to play rock and roll in the hope that one day all barriers will be torn down. He spoke from my heart. But when I stood at the Iron Curtain 2 days later and saw the barbed wire fences, my dreams of freedom burst like soap bubbles. I felt like I was in the USA for 4 hours, but Springsteen flew back home and I was left looked up at the border fence. A few weeks later, out of my lethargy, I left the Kalashnikov in the forest. I was at the end, really at the end. I didn't want any more.
Wow, that was a great description. Now, there must have been some bad consequences for you in terms of leaving your weapon behind in the forest.
So, Springsteen brought the spirit of freedom to the GDR, but even euphoric young people didn't believe the Berlin Wall would fall. The stupidity of the border surveillance made me despair. I couldn't trust any comrades. Some saw me sad state and made fun of me. I suffered from my existence. I did the opposite of what I wanted. So in the midst of my confusion, I left the gun behind in the forest. The first lieutenant didn't want to believe me, but when he understood it, he scolded, "Schultke, do you want to put me in jail?" I was surprised because I thought he says, "Schultke, I'll put you in jail." He was afraid for his career. The gun was exactly where I had spent 8 hours before. I was demoted for the incident in front of the assembled company, almost 100 soldiers. A non-commissioned officer told me beforehand that I should be sent off lightly, meaning no prison, as I would be released in 4 weeks anyway. I was happy because I could enjoy the demotion like a promotion, really. It was a real relief. I feel like a young schoolboy, so I become a real, all people must stay and stand up. And it felt like a really good happening for me. After that, I was only allowed to keep watch on the company premises. I also received a vacation ban and work suspension. Some soldiers blamed me for causing them stress, but there were also some who admired me for it. I was the only border guard in my passage who was discharged as a soldier. The others were all private. So I feel good because I really can tell you I never want to touch a gun. Also have connection with this border system, but I must stay in contact with this 18 months because my dreams of freedom so strong, and then my dreams, yes, 1 year later comes true, and that's the good happy end for me and 1989.
You're discharged as a soldier, so is a soldier the lowest rank that you can have?
Yes, that is the lowest rank I can have, yes.
After you're discharged as a soldier, what do you do? Do you have to go to work, I'm presuming?
Yes, in the fall of 1988, I was released from the army and I began training as a nurse, male nurse in Eisenach. On November the 9th, I went to Berlin by train and bought a ticket to Prague at Friedrichstraße station. Remember the refugees in the embassy, West Germany, you know, the films in autumn 1989? Yes. I want to do the same. As I left the station at Bahnhof Friedrichstraße in East Berlin, I was amazed at the quake of people at the border crossing into West Berlin. We call it Palace of Tears. But I had to catch my last train to Eisenhüttenstadt. So when I arrived at the hospital in the morning, the ward nurse and her colleagues were standing in the lawn with an open bottle of East German Rotkäppchen sparkling wine. Did you hear? The wall has fallen in Berlin. Oh, I can't believe it. The following week, we went on a company trip to West Berlin and we have make parties and all the colleagues together. It was fine.
I'm sure that was a hell of a party when you went to Berlin. Can you describe your experience when you first crossed into the West? Because it's something you've been wanting to do for years and years. What is that experience like?
So first, I see all the good feelings, people. So our East German car is Trabant. So all the Trabis go to pass the borders at Checkpoint Charlie and on other places. So all the people in East and West Berlin feel like in harmony. On November 11th, I passed the Iron Curtain for the first time at Checkpoint Charlie border crossing into West Berlin. In the middle of the many people, a woman asked me in English, "Are you a GDR citizen? Do you know English?" I replied, "Yes." She introduced herself. "I am a journalist from the BBC. Can you give us an interview with 2 other GDR citizens?" Oh, I answered happily, gladly. So we took a taxi to the Brandenburg Gate, and I saw myself on the TV screen. It was wonderful. I felt connected to the whole world. I received 100 German marks for 5 minutes of conversation. So 100 West German marks. A wonderful feeling, full of gratitude in the middle of the biggest party in the world. So it was really a good time. Autumn 1989, yes.
How do you look back today on your time at the border?
Yeah, so after the fall of the Berlin Wall, I studied political science at the West German University in Duisburg. The West German professors were not really interested in coming to terms with the Iron Curtain. Nevertheless, I wrote my final examination about it, and later 2 books were added. We should definitely remember this terrible GDR border. Unfortunately, there is not enough education about this in schools. I've been giving lectures at schools for 25 years, but it's a drop in the ocean. We were so lucky with the peaceful fall of the Berlin Wall. I would also like to give lectures about my experiences in Great Britain. I would be very happy about an invitation. We must learn from this dark history. Otherwise, it will repeat itself. Why do we forget so quickly? I'm grateful that this series exists here. So thank you, Ian, for this interview.
Well, Dietmar, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm completely with you about making sure all of this history is remembered, and you coming on the podcast really helps me to illustrate this. You know, you're the first East German border guard I've had the chance to interview, and your descriptions have been fantastic. I know that, you know, there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast. So an invitation to Britain to talk about your experiences might not be too long in coming for you. I certainly hope so anyway.
Okay, thank you. I wait for invitations. And I think it's really good to speak about this Cold War and this Iron Curtain. We have the chance to remember, and you are a good example for good history, and your lesson is a really good feeling for me. So we can remember, and that is a part of democracy. We must remember, and it's good for our system. So never communism. No, stop it, like Putin and the nationalism aggressions in the Ukraine. So it's a post-war conflict actually, and I think we must learn from our history. We must stay together. That's my message, and bring peace to Russia.
Do check out Dietmar's website at dietmar-schultke.de. The episode extras such as videos, photos and other content are available via a link in the episode information. The podcast wouldn't exist without the generous efforts of our financial supporters, and I'd like to thank one and all of them for keeping the podcast on the road. The Cold War conversation continues in our Facebook discussion group. Just search for Cold War Conversations in Facebook. Thanks very much for listening, and look forward to seeing you next week.